Are you aware that every 53 minutes someone is killed in an alcohol-related crash? That equates to over 27 people every day. In addition, drivers falling between the ages of 16 and 19 are considered 4 times more likely to die in a crash than their college counterparts. Does this put your son or daughter at risk? I'm Patrolman Craig Hoover with the East Brunswick Police Department. In this segment of Street Smart, we'll discuss the dangers of alcohol abuse with regard to the upcoming prom and graduation season, and provide some additional safety tips for teens and parents. I'm here today with Patrolman Jim Angemeyer, the Police Department's Special Operations Unit, a certified expert in the area of DWI and drug awareness. Hi, Jim.
How you doing, Officer Hoover?
Jim, this time of year with senior proms and graduations on the horizon always raises concern for us in the law enforcement field. What areas of concern should parents and teens have when it comes to these events?
Well, a lot of it has to do with transportation nowadays. A lot of these kids have provisionary driver's licenses when they're getting out of high school or they're just getting ready to graduate. This time of the year, prom season, they're traveling a lot. They're going back and forth, whether it's going to be going to a party, whether they're going to be going to a school for a graduation party, or actually for the prom itself. So in that sense, that you got to make sure that they're traveling with either somebody else who's a family member. They're not traveling with numerous kids in the car. They're wearing their seatbelt at all times when they're in the vehicle. And they also have to abide by the laws of having that sticker on the car, the orange sticker that they put on their license plate. And the times of travel, they're not to be out at night after 11:01 to 5 a.m. in the morning unless it's for an emergency purposes. But if they are stopped during them times, that it not only affects them and their driver's license, where it's a probationary license, they can have their license taken from them for up to 90 days from a judge. It also affects the parents because at the time the officer has their obligation to tow the vehicle if it's in the roadway that night, and it can affect the parents in that way when it comes to money to have to get the vehicle out of the impound yard. When it comes to involving alcohol or drugs nowadays, you got to make sure the kids are, the parents should be aware of who their children hang out with. At this age, obviously they should know who their friends are and how they're getting to the party, and what vehicle they're taking, whether they're using their own vehicle or if they're going with other friends and then possibly that friend's been drinking or driving or been under the influence of drugs. At the same time, a lot of these schools nowadays actually use transportation as a bus, where they don't allow any of the kids to drink before they go to a party. So utilize the buses that the schools provide nowadays to go to the prom. And if they're going to travel down to the shore, to know who they're traveling with, and if they're going to be taking their parents' car, that everything works properly, and that they go down in a safe manner between the times of the hour they're supposed to be operating the vehicle. Well, fatigue is a big thing. Nowadays, fatigue can be just as bad as drunk driving. And if alcohol is involved, you're talking about alcohol being a depressant, is going to slow everything down as well. So now your reaction time totally changes when you're operating a motor vehicle, as well as having drugs involved in that, if there's possibly any drugs involved. Whether there's antidepressants involved or any other narcotics that somebody might have taken, they got to be very careful when they get behind the wheel of a vehicle, for the fact that, not only being tired from a long day, and being out late from the graduation and going to a graduation party or the prom itself, they are then, if they possibly had alcohol involved or not, it's going to set in. But they got to be real careful, make sure to get a good night's sleep the night before. It's kind of just like in an event with a sport. You always want to get good rest, the night before or the day before, and make sure you're prepared for the following day on what you're going to do on your agenda.
Okay. Now, if somebody doesn't heed that advice and they go out, maybe they do some underage drinking and do decide to get behind the wheel of a vehicle, or maybe it's a sister or friend that's driving after these parties and they're of age, but they're still out there, what kind of penalties would somebody be looking at with regard to DWI and or underage drinking?
Well, first of all, you got a lot of penalties that you can deal with. As a probationary driver, your license can be taken from you right away from the judge. If you're caught under the influence of drugs or alcohol, we'll start with alcohol. You're looking at a possible loss of license for up to 3 months, maybe longer, depending on what what your blood alcohol concentration is that you blow, your BAC. Obviously, as a teenager or anybody under the age of 21, zero tolerance. We, as the East Brunswick Police Department, are highly trained in the enforcement of drunk driving. All of our officers are, and we take a zero tolerance approach for anybody under the influence of alcohol or drugs, especially those who are underage. When it comes to Drugs, we also have officers that are trained. They're called DREs, drug recognition experts. If, for instance, a son or a daughter of one of these family members is stopped for drunk driving or under the influence and the officer doesn't detect the odor of an alcoholic beverage at that time, they can call out one of these officers that are trained to look for other clinical indicators that the person might be under the influence of a drug and put them through different tests, and they can be brought back. So not only are now you being charged with drunk driving, you're also being charged with a criminal offense for under the influence of a drug. So they're all enhanced penalties that come along with part of this, drinking and driving. So it's just not worth it in the long sense, in the long run, when it comes to your insurance and losing your license. And today, what people need to remember is driving in the state of New Jersey is a privilege. It's not your right, and it can be taken from you at any time.
Now, Jim, what about parents who may host a party or supply alcohol to minors? What concerns do we have here as law enforcement, and what kind of penalties should they face?
Well, we have a major concern when it comes to civil liabilities. I mean, now you have kids at your house that are drinking. Whether you're there or not, you can be still charged with it. We have a township ordinance that was recently passed a couple years ago, specifically for this law, that if we come across a party and there's 25 kids there, we're calling 25 parents and notifying them, and we're also getting hold of the parents if they're there, if they're not, and they can be charged criminally. They can also be charged with a township ordinance that we have, which is a fine that's set by the judge, and our judges don't take that very lightly. At the same time, you're looking at civil suits. If, God forbid, one of those kids leave that party and they've been drinking and they have an accident and they hurt themselves or somebody else, you're looking at a liability of where they were coming from that night and who they were hanging out with. And that's why we try to stress to the parents, know where your kids are going that night, know who they're going to be with, know who their friends are. If they're going to go to a party, make sure there's going to be parents there, and that alcohol hopefully is not going to be served there. We're not condoning the right for alcohol to be served, but that if it is, and that they don't feel comfortable there, that they can call their parents if they want to go home.
Thank you, Jim, for providing your insight today. I would also like to thank George Logan's Towing for providing the site for today's filming. On behalf of the East Brunswick Police Department, we're wishing you a safe and healthy graduation and prom season.